the authors can't be inundated by noise all day, every day, or their authorship goes downhill because they're not focused on the things they need to be focused on. So it's not arrogant or sort of power grabbing for a CEO to say the beacon and the true north and the strategy is mine and my responsibility. I'll take input, we'll have conversations about it, but ultimately my responsibility in that role. That's not arrogant. That is actually reassuring to an organization because they know, okay, that's set. Now I know what I can focus on with my expertise and with my time and with my efforts. And that'll keep people from getting exhausted. You cannot run a beehive with 450 queens. You just don't get any work done. So I think that was really helpful to the organization. And I think coming from more of a collaborative environment, like a primary care practice, that probably took me a little bit. In the practice, I'm probably more of consensus is something you build in every organization. So maybe that wouldn't be the best way to say it, but it's a different process of building consensus in a service organization like a primary care practice. In a business, you have meetings to talk about strategy, but eventually somebody's got to set it, or you'll go every direction and therefore no direction at all for too long. Well,
and it takes a lot of time to create that 100% consensus. You might have one person over here on the sidelines. You say, Sanchit's over there. He's not quite bought in. Let's keep on talking. Well, there's time. You're losing time. So at some point, someone just has to say, this is the way we're going to go.
We've talked about this for long enough. Yeah. This is the strategy. Now let's have real good debate about how to execute it. But you never get to a good debate about how to execute a strategy if nobody sets it.
Yeah.
And so I think that was helpful. And that helped us sort of stay a little bit muffled from the nonsense, because there was a lot of nonsense.
Yeah. Okay, so now I want to pivot a little bit more into that experience. So one of the topics when we talk about kind of leadership and leading today, it's hard to talk about that without also touching on the topic of leading change.
Yeah.
Looking at what we have, deciding what we want to keep, deciding what we need to evolve or transform. So I'll let you share as much as you want to share, but I'd be curious, how did that idea of transformation or change play out in your time as CEO? And what guidance and counsel would you give to a new CEO in terms of the right way to manage that? It's kind of like, it's like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You don't want to go too slow. You don't want to go too fast. Like what's that? Just right.
Yeah. We had a natural inflection point for a biotech company without getting into too much of the technical part of it, because that would be a lot of time that we don't have. But when our company was getting close to a lot of human clinical trials, as opposed to what we call preclinical work, where you're doing animal studies on vaccines and preparing for those pivotal trials that get you all the way to a product, the transition from a company that's doing largely preclinical work to a company that is doing clinical work is a DNA change for an organization. Because the funding mechanisms are different, because the amount of money needed to do human clinical trials is so much greater. The non-dilutive funding that you often get through grants and governments sort of dries up pretty much, not entirely, but pretty much, and you have to go out and get different kinds of funding. The skill sets that you need from your science team change. You add skill sets that you need, regulatory, because, honestly, regulating animal studies is very different than regulating human studies. So without too much technical, we were at a place where every biotech company, if they're developing a medicine, or in this case, a vaccine, reaches this inflection point where you really have to change the DNA in the organization. And that was happening on top of COVID, where we couldn't work together with a CEO who'd never been a CEO before. So it was very, very interesting times. And to the other point, we did a good job keeping the noise out and focusing and not working 80 hours a week just because we pretended that would be effective. I think, again, it comes back to that beacon. First of all, you have to explain in context the reason for the change. Change, I don't believe, can be done because an organization has decided internally that it's not doing a good job, or it's not performing optimally, and there's no details provided other than we're going to just change things up here to do something different. Because that's scary to an organization, and unnecessarily so, because if you haven't thought through the reasons for your change and you can't enunciate them in an honest and transparent way to your organization, you need to go back to the beginning and say, wait a minute, okay, this is not change for change's sake, because change for change's sake just freaks people out. But if you can articulate, again, the strategy and say, this is why we need to make these changes. This is why what we've been can't be what we are in the future, whether it's the market's changed or in our case, the stage of the company was changing. There could be a lot of good reasons that you need change. Maybe it's just poor market performance. Maybe you have a bad culture internally in the organization. Within reason, to the degree that it's allowed without disparaging individuals, I think you have to be transparent about that stuff. It's your job as the CEO to figure out how transparent you can be with an organization. If it's HR changes, I think that's a different piece that has to be handled delicately, but people can handle the truth. What they don't like is being patronized by being told, this organization I've worked for a long time is going through a bunch of changes, but we're not going to tell you why. It's actually pretty insulting to somebody, right? They've been working in an important job for a long time. They've been executing a certain strategy. Now we're going to change the strategy for reasons that are not going to be explained just because management said so or the board decided, that's no fun. That's no fun. So I think that was, in our particular case, it was about consistent messaging around that issue of, this isn't because we've done anything wrong, it's because we've done everything right. But when you do everything right in this industry, you reach these inflection points where continuing to do that right isn't going to work because the game's changed. We're in a different game now. We're really good volleyball players. We're about to play basketball. Skill set's different, right? So I think just communication, transparent communication, and of course, consistency.